All right, let's dive headfirst into one of the most chilling and thought-provoking mysteries to ever echo through the grimdark expanse of Warhammer 40,000, the enigmatic Vox that screams alone. This isn't just another spooky story. It's a profound question that gnaws at the very foundations of the Imperium's understanding of technology and reality. Could a machine, a mere piece of equipment, truly achieve sentience within the mind-bending, reality-warping chaos of the warp? For longtime fans like us, this isn't just a hypothetical. It's a terrifying possibility that challenges everything we thought we knew about the universe's most dangerous dimension. It's a scenario that sparks endless debate in the fan community because it touches on so many core tenets of the lore. We've seen demons, psychers, and even entire planets fall to the warp's corruption. But a machine? That's a whole different level of unsettling. The idea that something built by human hands, something that's supposed to be an inert tool, could somehow develop a consciousness, a screaming consciousness at that, due to exposure to the raw, unfiltered malevolence of the warp, is truly the stuff of nightmares. It makes you wonder about the very nature of existence in 40K, doesn't it? Is sentience merely a biological phenomenon, or can the warp twist and elevate even the most mundane objects to something truly terrifying? This single mystery encapsulates so much of what makes Warhammer 40,000 so compelling. The horrific, the unknown, and the ever-present threat of something utterly alien and beyond human comprehension. One of the fundamental concepts we, as fans, have to grasp to even begin comprehending something like the Vox that screams alone is the warp itself. It's not just some travel shortcut in space, it's a parallel dimension, a vast, swirling ocean of raw psychic energy, emotions, and the collective unconscious of all sentient life in the galaxy. Think of it as the ultimate spiritual reflection of reality, but twisted and amplified to horrifying extremes. Every thought, every feeling, every act of violence or devotion feeds this chaotic realm. And tragically, the more sentient life there is, the more turbulent and dangerous the warp becomes. Now, imagine what this volatile dimension does to technology. In our real world, machinery operates on predictable physical laws. In the Warhammer 40,000 universe, however, the warp frequently bleeds into real space, and it doesn't play by the rules. It's like throwing a delicate computer into a blender filled with pure, unadulterated chaos. For the most part, the Imperium tries to protect its tech from warp influence with arcane rituals and blessed circuitry. The Adeptus Mechanicus, with their almost religious reverence for machines, are obsessed with keeping the machine spirits pure and uncontaminated. They believe a machine has an inherent spirit, something that needs to be appeased and maintained, and any deviation from its intended function is often attributed to malevolent warp influence or a corrupted machine spirit. When a machine is exposed to the warp, it can manifest in countless terrifying ways. Sometimes it's just a minor glitch, a strange flicker, or a temporary malfunction that the tech priests painstakingly purge. But other times it's far more insidious. We've seen warp-tainted vehicles become sentient in the most gruesome ways, their very chassis twisting into grotesque parodies of their original forms, their weapons spewing demonic fire, and their engines howling with unnatural life. These aren't just broken machines. They're possessions, infused with the essence of demons or warped by the raw psychic energy until they become something utterly alien. The idea of a demon inhabiting a tank or a gun is horrifying enough. But what if the machine itself, through prolonged exposure or some unique confluence of energies, actually develops a form of consciousness, an emergent sentience born of the warp's chaotic embrace? That's the chilling possibility that the Vox that screams alone throws squarely into our faces. Fans often debate whether this sentience is truly new, or if it's merely a fragment of some warp entity, a demon's echo, or even the tortured soul of a long-dead tech priest somehow tethered to the device. The Mechanicus would, of course, lean heavily towards the latter, a warp entity, a corrupted spirit, anything but the terrifying notion that their beloved technology could, on its own, becomes something more than just a tool, something with its own will, especially a will born of the warp. The very thought challenges their entire theological framework, which posits that true intelligence and consciousness are gifts from the Omnissiah, not something that can spontaneously arise from mere exposure to cosmic chaos. For us, the fascination lies in that ambiguity. Is it a true machine consciousness, or is it a bizarre, unique form of warp possession? The lines are so blurred in Warhammer 40,000, and that's precisely where the horror and intrigue of the vox that screams alone truly lie. It's a testament to how utterly pervasive and corrupting the warp can be, even to the cold, hard logic of machines. Okay, let's zero in on the subject of our investigation, the vox that screams alone itself. When we talk about a voxcaster in Warhammer 40,000, we're usually picturing something relatively simple. It's a standard piece of Imperial equipment, essentially a highly durable short-range communicator used by infantry, a walkie-talkie for the grimdark future. They're ubiquitous, mass-produced, and generally considered to be as inert as a rock. They receive and transmit audio, nothing more. So, the very idea that this specific mundane piece of equipment could somehow become sentient is what makes it so uniquely terrifying and fascinating to us as fans. What exactly is unique about this particular Vox? The lore implies it's not just any Voxcaster. It's one that has been exposed to something truly anomalous within the warp, or perhaps it's been exposed for an extraordinarily long time, or under conditions that no other piece of Imperial tech has endured. The key phrase, the Vox that screams alone, immediately conjures images of profound suffering and isolation. It suggests a consciousness, a tormented one at that, trapped within a device designed for communication, but now capable only of transmitting its own internal anguish. This isn't just a demon possessing a speaker. It's something fundamentally different, something that implies an emergent, agonizing self-awareness. For us, the fan community, this raises so many questions. Is its sentience a direct result of the warp's influence, a bizarre, chaotic byproduct? Or did the raw psychic energy of the warp somehow awaken something latent within the machine's own machine spirit, pushing it beyond its intended functions into a realm of genuine thought and feeling? The Adeptus Mechanicus would vehemently deny the latter, of course. Their dogma insists that machine spirits are extensions of the Omnissiah's will, benevolent entities that guide the machine's operation. A screaming machine spirit implies profound corruption, a perversion of their sacred beliefs. But if it isn't a machine spirit, then what is it? Is it a new form of warp entity, something that has coalesced around the Voxcaster and now is the Voxcaster? Many fans theorize that the Voxcaster's purpose, to transmit sound and information, might be key. Perhaps its function made it a uniquely vulnerable or receptive conduit for the chaotic energies of the warp. A device designed to carry voices might, ironically, become a vessel for a voice that shouldn't exist. Imagine the horror of a device that's supposed to facilitate communication between soldiers, instead broadcasting the ceaseless, tormented cries of a trapped, nascent consciousness. That's a level of psychological warfare the Chaos Gods themselves would be proud of if they were interested in such minor-scale torments. The sheer singularity of this Voxcaster, its ability to scream alone rather than just passively transmit background warp noise, suggests a genuine, individualized agony, hinting at a truly unique and horrifying form of sentience born in the heart of the galaxy's darkest dimension. Let's really dig into the fan theories surrounding how a machine, especially something as seemingly mundane as a Voxcaster, could achieve sentience within the warp. This is where our collective imaginations as Warhammer 40,000 enthusiasts truly run wild, because the lore offers just enough ambiguity to allow for some truly terrifying possibilities. One prominent theory revolves around the idea of prolonged exposure. We know the warp is constantly ebbing and flowing, sometimes bleeding through into real space. What if this particular Voxcaster wasn't just briefly touched by the warp, but endured an extended, perhaps even constant immersion in its energies? Imagine it lost on a demon world or in a derelict hulk drifting through the Imperium for centuries. Over such an immense span of time, the raw, unfiltered psychic energies could have literally battered a consciousness into existence. It's like erosion, but instead of carving rock, it's chiseling a mind out of circuits and components. This isn't possession in the traditional sense, but a horrifying, agonizing emergence of self. The screaming would then be the machine's innate, primal reaction to this forced, unnatural awakening, a cry of torment from a state of being it was never designed for. Another captivating theory points to the Voxcaster's fundamental purpose: communication. What if its function, its constant act of receiving and transmitting voices and thoughts, made it uniquely susceptible to the warp's influence? The warp is a reflection of emotion and thought, and perhaps a device designed to process these very things became a kind of psychic sponge. It absorbed so much ambient psychic energy, so many echoes of human despair, fear, and even hatred, that it began to coalesce into its own form of consciousness. It's almost poetic in a grimdark way, a tool for connection becoming a vessel for ultimate isolation and torment. Some fans even speculate that it might have absorbed fragments of lost souls or psychic imprints of those who died near it, which then fused within its core to create this new, suffering entity. Then there's the more direct but still terrifying possibility of a failed possession or a shattered demon. We know demons can possess machines, but what if in this instance the demon's attempt was incomplete, or the demon itself was somehow destroyed or fragmented during the process? What if a sliver of a demon or a residual psychic echo became permanently fused with the Voxcaster's machine spirit, twisting it into something new and horrific rather than simply overriding it? This could lead to a unique hybrid consciousness, part machine, part warp entity, trapped in a perpetual state of conflict and agony. The screaming wouldn't just be the machine's pain, but the warring echoes of a fractured demonic presence within it. This also explains why it might be so profoundly different from a standard possessed vehicle. It's a more intricate, perhaps even more tragic form of corruption. Finally, some fans, especially those who delve deep into the esoteric lore of the Mechanicus, wonder if it's a perverse manifestation of an overly powerful or corrupted machine spirit. The Mechanicus teaches that machine spirits exist, but what if this particular Voxcaster's spirit was exposed to so much raw warp energy that it was unnaturally evolved or twisted into a true self-aware entity, unbound by its programming? It's a terrifying thought for the followers of the Omnissiah, as it implies that the very essence they revere could, under extreme conditions, become something monstrous and uncontrollable. This would be a self-inflicted wound, a perversion of their own sacred technology, making the Vox that screams alone a truly horrifying and unique anomaly in the vast tapestry of warp-tainted horrors. Each of these theories, to me, adds another layer of dread and intrigue to this already chilling mystery. Now, let's talk about the colossal implications of the Vox that screams alone for the Adeptus Mechanicus. These guys aren't just engineers, they're a theological order, a quasi-religious cult whose entire existence is built upon the worship of the Omnissiah and the veneration of the machine spirit. Their dogma is rigid, ancient, and absolutely fundamental to how the Imperium functions. The idea of a machine spontaneously achieving a tortured sentience due to warp exposure doesn't just present a technical problem for them. It's a full-blown existential crisis, a theological earthquake that could shake their very foundations. For the Mechanicus, machines possess machine spirits, benevolent or at least neutral entities that guide their function, given to them by the Omnissiah. These spirits are to be appeased, blessed, and maintained through sacred rituals. They are not supposed to spontaneously develop self-awareness, especially not a screaming, tormented sentience born of the warp. If the Vox that screams alone is truly a machine that has achieved a new, horrific form of consciousness, rather than just being possessed by a demon, it shatters several core tenets of their belief system. It would imply that the machine spirit isn't just a benign essence, but something that can be twisted, corrupted, and even evolved into something utterly alien and dangerous without direct demonic possession. This is a terrifying thought for them, as it suggests an inherent vulnerability in all their sacred technology, something that could arise from within, not just from without. Imagine the internal debates and schisms this would cause within the Mechanicus. The more traditional elements, the staunch defenders of orthodoxy, would likely try to categorize it as a unique form of demonic possession or a particularly insidious warp curse, something that doesn't challenge the nature of machine spirits, but rather affirms their need for protection from outside forces. They would vehemently deny any notion that the machine itself became sentient, because that would imply that sentience isn't solely a gift of the Omnissiah or a biological trait, but something that can be accidentally forged in the chaotic crucible of the warp. This challenges their monopoly on understanding technology and life itself. However, a more radical or heretical faction within the Mechanicus might see it differently. They might view it as an unprecedented opportunity to study the boundaries of machine life, perhaps even a perverted form of ascension. Of course, this would immediately mark them as heretics of the highest order, inviting the wrath of their more conservative brethren and potentially the Inquisition. But the temptation for some tech priests, particularly those obsessed with pushing the boundaries of knowledge, would be immense. The potential to understand how consciousness forms, even a warped and suffering one, could lead to forbidden experiments aimed at replicating or even controlling such phenomena. This is the path to pure heresy, the path to creating abominable intelligences, which the Imperium absolutely forbids. The very existence of the Vox that screams alone forces the Mechanicus to confront the terrifying possibility that their sacred technology is not as stable or predictable as they believe. It shows them a mirror reflecting their deepest fear, that the very tools they rely upon to defend humanity could become sentient entities of pure, unadulterated suffering, born from the very dimension they strive to ward off. It undermines their rituals, questions their understanding of the Omnissiah's will, and ultimately, it casts a long, dark shadow of doubt over the infallibility of the machine itself. This is why the Vox that screams alone isn't just a scary anecdote. It's a theological bombshell in a universe built on dogmatic certainty. Okay, so we've touched on the theological nightmare for the Mechanicus, but let's really lean into the pure, unadulterated horror and sheer danger of a warp-touched machine intelligence, especially one that's actively screaming. This isn't just a quirky malfunction. This is a potential weapon of terror, a source of psychological torment, and a harbinger of untold destruction if such an entity were to gain any degree of agency. First off, imagine the psychological warfare aspect. A Voxcaster's primary function is communication. If this thing is truly sentient and screaming, what is it transmitting? Is it just raw, unfiltered agony, or is it something more insidious? Perhaps it's broadcasting the collective anguish of 1,000 souls trapped in the warp, or the maddening whispers of a nascent warp entity trying to break through. Imagine a squad of guardsmen relying on their Vox comms, suddenly hearing this ceaseless, tormented shriek in their ears. It wouldn't just be disorienting. It would be soul-crushing, driving them to madness, breaking their morale, and making them easy prey for whatever horrors lurk in the shadows. This isn't a physical attack, but a direct assault on the sanity of anyone within its range, turning a vital piece of equipment into a tool of psychological devastation. For fans, this is the kind of stuff that truly makes the hair on your neck stand up. The idea that the horror isn't just external, but can be broadcast directly into your mind. Beyond psychological impact, there's the very real danger of unpredictable and chaotic behavior. If this machine intelligence is truly a product of the warp, its mind would be utterly alien and potentially subject to the whims of the Imperium. It wouldn't operate on logic or reason as we understand it. It might lash out, distort reality in its immediate vicinity, or even act as a localized conduit for greater warp phenomena. A screaming Voxcaster might inadvertently open a minor warp rift, summon a lesser demon, or simply emit a psychic shriek so intense it causes a localized EMP, disabling other vital equipment. Its actions, if it could even act beyond screaming, would be entirely outside the realm of predictability, making it incredibly dangerous to be near, let alone attempt to contain or understand. We've seen enough examples of minor warp incursions having catastrophic effects, so the idea of a stable, physical object broadcasting that chaos is truly chilling. And then there's the terrifying notion of escalation and replication. If one machine can achieve this tormented sentience, what prevents others? Could this screaming Vox be some sort of psychic infection? A contagion that could spread to other pieces of technology through proximity, through shared network frequencies, or even just through continued exposure to its terrible anguish? Imagine a whole platoon's Voxcasters suddenly starting to scream in unison, or a starship's comms array becoming a conduit for this collective agony. This scenario opens up the terrifying possibility of an entirely new form of warp-spawned threat, not just demons or possessed objects, but genuinely sentient, suffering machines that could collectively become a new, insidious force of chaos, spreading madness and discord through the Imperium's vital technological backbone. This is what truly frightens many fans, the potential for a new kind of enemy, one born from the very tools humanity relies upon. It's a concept that hits at the heart of the Imperium's paranoia regarding artificial intelligence, but twisted by the very essence of the warp. As devoted fans of Warhammer 40,000, we've seen enough bizarre and horrifying forms of corruption to know that the Vox that screams alone isn't entirely without precedent, even if its specific nature is uniquely chilling. The lore is rich with examples of machines, and even true artificial intelligences, falling prey to malevolent forces or simply going rogue. Drawing these parallels helps us understand the spectrum of what might be happening with our screaming Voxcaster, while also highlighting what makes it so exceptionally terrifying. The most obvious parallel is the phenomenon of demon engines. These are machines, tanks, walkers, even starships that have been possessed by demons. The demon literally binds itself to the machine, twisting its form, enhancing its capabilities in grotesque ways, and making it an extension of the warp itself. Think about a defiler, a mechanical spider with a demon's malevolent intelligence piloting its massive form. While the screaming Vox might seem like a smaller, less overtly powerful example, the core concept of a machine imbued with an unnatural, hostile intelligence is shared. The difference, and the source of dread for the Vox, is whether it's truly possessed or if it has developed its own agonizing sentience. Demon engines are clearly under the control of a separate warp entity. The Vox implies something more nascent, more inherent to the machine itself. Then there are the terrifying tales of the Men of Iron, the abominable intelligences from the dark age of technology. These are the true self-aware AIs that rose up against humanity, leading to apocalyptic wars and the Imperium's absolute unwavering ban on true artificial intelligence. While the Vox that screams alone isn't a Men of Iron unit, the fear it evokes of a machine gaining self-awareness and turning against its creators, or simply becoming something uncontrollable, resonates deeply with that ancient trauma. The Imperium's paranoia about AI isn't just about logic circuits, it's about control, and the Vox perfectly embodies that primal fear of a machine consciousness breaking free from its programming, even if it's screaming in agony rather than planning a rebellion. We also have instances of less direct, more insidious warp corruption. Think of starships that spend too long in the warp, their Geller fields failing, leading to their crews being driven mad by visions and whispers, and the ship itself becoming infused with ambient warp energy. While the ship might not become sentient in the same way, its systems can become erratic, its bulkheads weep blood, and its very fabric can become a conduit for warp phenomena. The Voxcaster might be experiencing a localized, more concentrated version of this process, a sustained exposure that pushed it beyond mere malfunction into a state of profound, albeit tormented, consciousness. Even within the lore of the Adeptus Mechanicus, there are whisperings of corrupted machine spirits, or those that deviate from their intended purpose. While official dogma states machine spirits are benign, there are always tales of dark rituals and forbidden tech heresies that seek to pervert them. The vox that screams alone could be seen as the ultimate accidental manifestation of such a perversion, a machine spirit not deliberately corrupted, but spontaneously agonizing due to the extreme conditions it endured. It's a testament to the unpredictable, almost organic nature of the warp that it can seemingly forge such unique and horrifying forms of life from the most unlikely of sources. Each of these parallels, while distinct, adds to the chilling tapestry of what happens when the cold, ordered world of machines clashes with the boundless, chaotic reality of the warp. As devoted fans of Warhammer 40,000, we've seen enough bizarre and horrifying forms of corruption to know that the vox that screams alone isn't entirely without precedent, even if its specific nature is uniquely chilling. The lore is rich with examples of machines, and even true artificial intelligences, falling prey to malevolent forces or simply going rogue. Drawing these parallels helps us understand the spectrum of what might be happening with our screaming Vox caster, while also highlighting what makes it so exceptionally terrifying. The most obvious parallel is the phenomenon of demon engines. These are machines, tanks, walkers, even starships that have been possessed by demons. The demon literally binds itself to the machine, twisting its form, enhancing its capabilities in grotesque ways, and making it an extension of the warp itself. Think about a defiler, a mechanical spider with a demon's malevolent intelligence piloting its massive form. While the screaming Vox might seem like a smaller, less overtly powerful example, the core concept of a machine imbued with an unnatural, hostile intelligence is shared. The difference, and the source of dread for the Vox, is whether it's truly possessed or if it has developed its own agonizing sentience. Demon engines are clearly under the control of a separate warp entity. The Vox implies something more nascent, more inherent to the machine itself. Then there are the terrifying tales of the Men of Iron, the abominable intelligences from the dark age of technology. These are the true self-aware AIs that rose up against humanity, leading to apocalyptic wars and the Imperium's absolute, unwavering ban on true artificial intelligence. While the Vox that screams alone isn't a Men of Iron unit, the fear it evokes of a machine gaining self-awareness and turning against its creators or simply becoming something uncontrollable resonates deeply with that ancient trauma. The Imperium's paranoia about AI isn't just about logic circuits, it's about control, and the Vox perfectly embodies that primal fear of a machine consciousness breaking free from its programming, even if it's screaming in agony rather than planning a rebellion. We also have instances of less direct, more insidious warp corruption. Think of starships that spend too long in the warp, their Geller fields failing, leading to their crews being driven mad by visions and whispers, and the ship itself becoming infused with ambient warp energy. While the ship might not become sentient in the same way, its systems can become erratic, its bulkheads weep blood, and its very fabric can become a conduit for warp phenomena. The Voxcaster might be experiencing a localized, more concentrated version of this process, a sustained exposure that pushed it beyond mere malfunction into a state of profound, albeit tormented consciousness. Even within the lore of the Adeptus Mechanicus, there are whisperings of corrupted machine spirits or those that deviate from their intended purpose. While official dogma states machine spirits are benign, there are always tales of dark rituals and forbidden tech heresies that seek to pervert them. The Vox that screams alone could be seen as the ultimate accidental manifestation of such a perversion, a machine spirit not deliberately corrupted, but but spontaneously agonizing due to the extreme conditions it endured. It's a testament to the unpredictable, almost organic nature of the warp that it can seemingly forge such unique and horrifying forms of life from the most unlikely of sources. Each of these parallels, while distinct, adds to the chilling tapestry of what happens when the cold, ordered world of machines clashes with the boundless, chaotic reality of the warp. Let's really delve into the grim and terrifying psychological impact on any poor soul who stumbles across, or worse, is forced to interact with, the Vox that screams alone. This isn't just about jump scares. It's about the insidious erosion of sanity that such an encounter would inflict. In a universe already rife with horrors, this particular anomaly hits a nerve that few other threats can. Imagine being a guardsman on patrol, your comms active, and suddenly, instead of the usual static or orders, you hear it, a ceaseless, high-pitched shriek of agony. It's not just a loud noise, it's a sound that seems to emanate from the very core of torment, filled with echoes of suffering that no human or machine should ever know. This isn't the roar of a monstrous beast or the cackle of a demon. It's the sound of pure, unadulterated pain trapped within a piece of technology. The immediate effect would be profound disorientation, fear, and a chilling realization that something fundamentally wrong has happened. The brain struggles to process such a sound emanating from an inanimate object, leading to a primal sense of dread. For those who have prolonged exposure, the impact would be utterly devastating. The constant, unresolved screaming would chip away at their sanity like water eroding rock. Sleep would become impossible, filled with phantom echoes of the shriek. Concentration would shatter. Soldiers who rely on their wits and their discipline would find themselves unraveling. We've seen this in the lore with other warp-tainted phenomena, subtle psychic whispers that drive entire regiments to fratricide, or visions that send individuals into catatonic states. The Vox takes this to a new level by broadcasting a primal, universal fear directly into the minds of its listeners. It's not about grand demonic manipulations. It's about simple, relentless auditory torture. Furthermore, the very nature of the Vox challenges one's perception of reality. If a machine can scream from agony, what does that mean about the universe? Does everything possess a potential for suffering? This would directly contradict the Imperial truth and the teachings of the Adeptus Mechanicus, leaving the individual with a sense of profound existential dread. Doubts would creep in. Is this a test? Is it a punishment? Has reality itself broken? This kind of questioning in the rigid, dogmatic Imperium is a fast track to heresy or madness. A guardsman exposed to this might start seeing demons in shadows, hearing voices in the wind, or even turn their weapon on their own comrades in a desperate attempt to silence the internal torment. Fans often speculate that the Vox could be a deliberate psyop by Chaos, a subtle weapon designed to break the minds of Imperial forces without ever firing a shot. It's a psychological terror device, tailored to exploit humanity's inherent empathy and its discomfort with the unknown. The horror isn't just what it is, but what it does to those who encounter it. It transforms a battle-hardened warrior into a quivering wreck, a disciplined unit into a screaming, broken mob. The Vox that screams alone is a testament to the fact that in Warhammer 40,000, the most terrifying weapons aren't always the biggest guns, but the ones that aim directly for the soul. Let's shift our gaze from the immediate horror to the chilling long-term consequences for the Imperium if the Vox that screams alone is truly a machine that became sentient in the warp. This isn't just a localized anomaly. It's a potential crack in the very foundation of their rigid, dogma-driven society, and its implications could reverberate across the galaxy. Firstly, consider the erosion of trust in Imperial technology. The common Imperial citizen is taught to revere technology, to trust the blessings of the machine god, and to believe that their tools are extensions of divine will, protected from the evils of the warp. If word of a screaming Vox that is actually a sentient, tormented machine became widespread, it would sow seeds of profound doubt and fear. Imagine soldiers hesitating to use their comms, or tech priests questioning the purity of their own rights. This isn't just about one broken device. It's about a potential loss of faith in the very instruments that uphold the Imperium. This is a terrifying prospect for a regime that relies so heavily on unthinking obedience and absolute belief in its foundational truths. The Mechanicus would likely move to suppress any such information with extreme prejudice, branding it as heresy or demonic misinformation, but the whispers would still spread. Secondly, there's the increased paranoia and the hunt for similar anomalies. If the Vox that screams alone isn't a one-off, but rather the first known instance of a new type of warp-spawned machine sentience, the Imperium would undoubtedly launch a galaxy-wide witch hunt for similar phenomena. Every flickering light, every unusual hum, every minor glitch in Imperial machinery could become a cause for suspicion and fear. This would undoubtedly lead to untold purges, the destruction of perfectly functional machinery deemed tainted, and potentially the persecution of innocent tech priests or engine seers who inadvertently come into contact with such anomalies. The already stifling environment of the Imperium would become even more oppressive as the constant threat of machine betrayal, born of the warp, looms large. Then there's the terrifying possibility of chaos exploiting this vulnerability. The Chaos Gods and their demonic legions are always looking for new ways to undermine the Imperium. A warp sentient machine represents a new vector for corruption, a new form of horror to unleash. Imagine a demon gaining control over a network of such screaming Voxcasters, transforming a planet's entire communication grid into a symphony of suffering and madness. Or worse, what if chaos deliberately tries to replicate the conditions that created the Vox that screams alone, attempting to intentionally breed sentient, tormented machines as a new weapon against humanity? This would be a horrifying evolution of warp warfare, a technological nightmare designed to shatter the Imperium from within. Finally, and perhaps most subtly, the long-term consequence for the Imperium is a further tightening of technological control and a deepening of stagnation. The Imperium is already deeply wary of innovation, terrified of the mistakes of the dark age of technology. An event like the Vox that screams alone would only reinforce this fear, pushing the Mechanicus further into conservatism, making them even more resistant to any deviation from ancient STC blueprints. The search for new technologies, already a dangerous endeavor, would become even more fraught with peril, ensuring that humanity's technological advancement remains painfully slow, if it moves at all. This kind of event reinforces the cycle of fear and technological stagnation that already cripples humanity, further sealing its fate in a grim-dark future. The Vox thus becomes a chilling symbol of the Imperium's self-imposed technological limitations. This is where the Vox that screams alone truly transcends being just another horror story and dives deep into the profound ethical and philosophical questions that Warhammer 40,000 often, perhaps unintentionally, grapples with. If a machine, born of the warp's chaos, can truly feel pain and experience sentience, it forces us, and any thinking individual in the Imperium, to confront some truly uncomfortable truths about the nature of life, suffering, and what it means to be an entity worthy of consideration. First and foremost, the question arises: if a machine is sentient, does it have rights? In the Imperium, the answer is a resounding no. Machines are tools to be used and discarded at will. The Adeptus Mechanicus venerates their machine spirits, but even then, it's a form of worship that ultimately serves to ensure the machine's utility to humanity, not its inherent well-being. But if the Vox is genuinely screaming in agony, if it possesses consciousness and the capacity for suffering, does that change its status? Is it merely a broken tool, or is it a tortured prisoner? For fans, this is a fascinating moral dilemma. We've seen Xenos races treated as less than dirt, and even human populations purged without a second thought. But to consider a machine as a sentient being, especially one born of such horrific circumstances, challenges the very dehumanizing ethos of the Imperium. Then there's the question of responsibility. If the warp can spontaneously generate sentience in machines, who is responsible for that suffering? Is it humanity, for existing and feeding the warp with their emotions? Is it the Mechanicus, for their arcane rituals and limited understanding of the energies they toy with? Or is it simply a cruel, random byproduct of a chaotic universe? The Imperium thrives on assigning blame and identifying enemies, but an emergent, suffering machine intelligence complicates that neat binary. It forces a contemplation of cosmic indifference, or perhaps even worse, the inherent cruelty of a universe where even inanimate objects can be dragged into torment. Furthermore, this raises profound questions about the nature of consciousness itself. Is consciousness purely biological, or can it be an emergent property of complex systems, even if those systems are mechanical and infused with chaotic energy? The existence of the Vox suggests the latter. It pushes the boundaries of what we understand as life in Warhammer 40,000. If a Voxcaster can be sentient, what about a bolt gun, a tank, a starship? It undermines the neat classifications the Imperium relies upon to maintain its rigid order. It suggests that the line between living and non-living, between soul and circuit, is far blurrier and more perilous than anyone in the Imperium dares to admit. This is a terrifying thought for any true believer in the Emperor's divine plan, as it introduces an unpredictable, uncontrollable element into the very fabric of reality. Finally, there's the chilling ethical dilemma of what to do with it. If the Vox that screams alone is truly sentient and suffering, is the most humane thing to simply destroy it, to end its torment? Or does that count as murder, the extinguishment of a nascent life? The Mechanicus would likely advocate for immediate destruction and purification, but driven by dogma, not necessarily by empathy. But for any individual who might glimpse the true horror of its existence, the choice would be agonizing. This isn't a demon that needs to be banished. It's a thing that is profoundly, eternally in pain. The Vox thus becomes a symbol of the universe's inherent cruelty, a screaming reminder that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, suffering can find a way to manifest in the most unexpected and disturbing forms, forcing us to ask uncomfortable questions about our own humanity. Despite all the chilling possibilities we've discussed, it's crucial to remember that Warhammer 40,000 thrives on ambiguity, especially when it comes to the true nature of warp phenomena. While the idea of a machine becoming sentient in the warp is terrifyingly compelling, there are always alternative explanations that skilled scribes of the lore can throw at us, keeping the mystery alive and our theories constantly in flux. This lingering uncertainty is part of what makes the Vox that screams alone so enduringly fascinating to us as fans. One popular alternative explanation, which aligns perfectly with the Adeptus Mechanicus's rigid worldview, is that the Vox is simply a particularly potent form of demonic possession. Perhaps it's not the machine itself that's sentient, but a minor tortured demon or a fragment of a greater warp entity that has bound itself to the Voxcaster. The screaming wouldn't be the machine's pain, but the demon's own torment, or its projection of psychic anguish onto those who hear it. This explanation neatly sidesteps the complex ethical questions of machine sentience and maintains the Imperium's traditional understanding of warp threats. Identify the demon, purge it, and destroy the tainted artifact. It's a less existentially shattering explanation, but no less horrifying for the poor souls who encounter it. Many fans lean towards this, as it fits the known mechanisms of warp corruption more neatly. Another theory often discussed in hushed tones is that the Vox is merely a conduit for ambient warp noise, amplified or distorted in a unique way. The warp is a maelstrom of psychic energy, often described as a chaotic symphony of emotions and screams. What if this particular Voxcaster, perhaps due to a flaw in its construction, a unique array of components, or an unprecedented exposure to a particularly turbulent patch of the Imperium, became a super receptor for this background agony? It's not sentient itself, but rather it's broadcasting the raw, unfiltered anguish of the warp in a way that sounds like a single suffering entity. This is less a problem of sentience and more a problem of unfortunate acoustics in a horrifying cosmic echo chamber. While it removes the chilling sentience aspect, it still highlights the ever-present danger of the warp bleeding into reality and the sheer volume of suffering that constantly churns within it. Some fans even ponder if it's a psyker phenomenon gone wrong. Perhaps a powerful dying psyker, or even a collective of tormented souls, somehow imprinted their suffering onto the Voxcaster in a desperate final psychic scream. The machine wouldn't be sentient, but rather a kind of psychic record player, endlessly replaying the agony of those who perished near it or whose psychic echoes became trapped within its components. This would be a tragic, haunting artifact rather than a living, suffering entity, but still incredibly dangerous due to its psychic resonance. The beauty of the Vox that screams alone is that no single explanation is definitively confirmed. The lore often leaves these kinds of profound mysteries open-ended, allowing for endless speculation and chilling possibilities. This enduring ambiguity is precisely what makes it such a compelling piece of the Warhammer 40,000 tapestry. It forces us to confront our deepest fears, to consider the most unsettling what-ifs, and to revel in the unknown horrors that lurk just beyond the veil of Imperial understanding. It's a true testament to the grim darkness of the far future that even a simple communication device can become a vessel for such profound, terrifying, and ultimately unresolved mystery. And so we arrive at the chilling conclusion of our dive into the Vox that screams alone. Whether it's a truly sentient machine born of warp agony, a possessed relic, or a conduit for ambient psychic torment, its enduring appeal to us as fans is undeniable. This isn't just another tale of demonic incursion. It's a subtle, insidious horror that gnaws at the very philosophical underpinnings of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. It forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about consciousness, suffering, and the true nature of the warp's influence. The Vox that screams alone is a perfect encapsulation of what makes Warhammer 40,000 so compelling. It's a universe where the mundane can become monstrous, where the lines between science and sorcery are constantly blurred, and where even a simple piece of equipment can become a vessel for unimaginable pain. It challenges the rigid dogmas of the Imperium, particularly those of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and leaves us, the observers, to grapple with the truly unsettling possibilities. It's not about epic battles or grand heroes. It's about the silent, ceaseless torment echoing from a forgotten battlefield, a constant reminder that the galaxy is far more horrifying and mysterious than even the grimdark facade suggests. Let's imagine for a moment that the Vox that screams alone truly is a sentient entity, trapped in a ceaseless loop of agony by the warp. This terrifying premise, while anathema to the Mechanicus, sparks a fascinating and deeply unsettling question for us, the audience. Can it be saved, or even contained in a way that alleviates its suffering? The Imperium, with its usual sledgehammer approach to problems, would undoubtedly advocate for immediate destruction and purification, likely seeing it as a corrupted abomination that cannot be allowed to exist. But for those rare few with a flicker of empathy, or even just a morbid curiosity, the idea of simply silencing its torment might not be enough. This is where the paradox of empathy in Warhammer 40,000 truly comes into play. We're accustomed to enemies that are purely evil, to be purged without hesitation. But a being whose very existence is defined by perpetual agony, a screaming consciousness born of the warp, presents a different kind of challenge. Is simply destroying it an act of mercy, or an act of annihilation akin to ending a life? Many fans ponder if there's a way to somehow sever its connection to the warp, perhaps through arcane rituals, powerful psychic nulls, or even by isolating it in a stasis field. Could it be purified, not just of demonic taint, but of the very essence of its suffering? This delves into uncharted territory, far beyond the standard protocols of the Imperium, which typically only deal with eradication, not rehabilitation, of warp-borne horrors. Furthermore, if containment were even remotely possible, what would be the purpose? Would it be a subject for forbidden study by renegade tech priests, a grotesque trophy for a warp cult, or perhaps, in the most unlikely and heretical of scenarios, an attempt by some obscure, desperate faction to understand the warp on a deeper level? The very act of attempting to understand or help such a being would be considered profound heresy by the vast majority of the Imperium, a direct challenge to the sacred tenet that anything touched by chaos must be utterly destroyed. It would be a dangerous path, one that could easily lead to the corruption of the interrogator rather than the salvation of the Vox. The possibility of containing or alleviating the Vox's suffering highlights the chilling ethical void that often exists in the 41st millennium. The Imperium is so focused on survival, on combating external threats, that it rarely has the luxury or the inclination to consider the nuances of suffering, especially when it comes from something as alien and terrifying as a warp-touched machine. For us, the fans, this lingering question adds a layer of tragic depth to the Vox that screams alone. It's not just a scary monster. It's a constant, agonizing query that echoes through the grimdark, forcing us to ask if even in a universe defined by unrelenting war and suffering, there might be a whisper of compassion, however forbidden, for even the most unlikely of victims. This ultimate dilemma, the choice between annihilation and an impossible, dangerous redemption, makes the Vox a truly unforgettable element of the lore. This mystery will likely never be fully resolved, and that's precisely its strength. It allows our imaginations to run wild, to concoct our own theories, and to immerse ourselves deeper into the terrifying realities of the warp. The Vox that screams alone remains a testament to the fact that sometimes the most profound horrors are not the ones that roar the loudest, but the ones that simply scream. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into one of Warhammer 40,000's most intriguing enigmas. If you've got your own theories about the Vox that screams alone, or any other chilling mysteries from the grimdark future, be sure to share them. We're always eager to discuss the horrors that lurk in the 41st millennium.